I look forward to being that one day.
Hey, before we go public, share a little story.
We have a quorum here, and we will. It is 9:02, so we will call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I am serving as the chairman for the MDTA Finance Committee meeting this morning. I hereby call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 9:02 a.m. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and being live streamed on the MDTA Finance Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. I ask that anyone who is presenting or answering a question to please turn your video and audio on when speaking. When you are done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no members of the media pre-registered to speak at today's meeting. At this time, we will move on to agenda number 1. Okay. The approval of the minutes from February 9th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented, or is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Move to approve.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from member Carroll, second from member Rosen. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will go right into item number 2, the board resolution 21-04. Alan Garman will present this morning. Good morning, Alan. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good morning. We're seeking
a review of Board Resolution 21-04 and a recommendation of the Finance Committee to move on to the full board for approval. The resolution details the authorized positions with delegated authority to execute investment-related transactions. And this resolution amends and restates prior resolution from approximately 10 years ago. And we're essentially just revising the management titles of the authorized individuals. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to also provide an overview of the investment management process and how the trust agreement, the investment policy, and this resolution all relate. Section 502 of the trust agreement requires that funds held in trust be invested by officers or employees of the MDTA as designated by a board resolution. So that's essentially the purpose of this resolution. And in section 3 of the attached resolution, you can see that the employees that are designated as being authorized include the chief financial officer, the director of finance, the deputy director of finance, the director of treasury and debt, and the investment administrator. The investment portfolio is managed internally by the director of treasury and debt, and also the investment administrator as directed by the CFO and the investment committee. Our conservative investment structure is driven by our investment policy constraints, and which are essentially driven by the trust agreement's legal constraints. The agency is a bit unique in that we have statutory authority to manage our investments separate from the monies of the state of Maryland, and that was provided in state law. The agency's trust agreement is essentially the governing document, and it sets forth limitations on investments. And so while we're independent from the state treasurer's office and state law doesn't pertain to our portfolio, if you look at the trust agreement, it's very similar to the state law. So the investment limitations in the trust are similar to the investment limitations in state law. Our investment strategy is driven by our cash flow needs, the investment policy limitations, and also total return considerations. So our broad investment strategy is directed by an investment committee that consists of certain members of senior management, including our executive director and chief financial officer. We also have other management involved, and one of our external municipal advisors participates in the investment committee. So our strategy, investment policy, compliance, and total return performance relative to benchmark indices are reviewed monthly by the investment committee, and then we move on to the finance committee and then to the board for approval. Provisions in the trust agreement legally control the investment of revenues of the MDTA. That's section 502 sets the maturity limitations, and it also refers to the defined term in the trust agreement, and it's the investment obligations is the defined term, and that's the section where it sets forth the types of investments that can be purchased. In addition to the core toll revenue related funds, we also manage certain conduit related financings or non-recourse related financings. So several financings have been done for the Maryland Aviation Administration and also WMATA. So we manage those groups of accounts as well. So there are bond service accounts and debt service reserves. And essentially they have some of those financings have essentially what's like our general account. It's essentially an improvement account. So those last 4 bullets really tie everything together and summarize the process. So the foundation is in the trust agreement that sets forth our legal limitations. Then the board adopts an investment policy, which is essentially based on the trust agreement. And then we add detail and refinements over the years. And that's with, based on advice we received from external advisors, looking at peer municipalities and industry best practices. we take that investment policy to our investment committee and discuss any changes, and then we move on to the finance committee and board with recommendations on duration targets and benchmarks. And then that all flows essentially to the investment manager, which is myself and Clayton. And we have, what I would characterize as limited investment discretion. So we do select the individual securities, but we're constrained by the trust agreement, the investment policy, and then the board directed strategy and investment committee directed strategy. So we're essentially just seeking an approval to move on to the full board for full approval. Are there any questions?
Any questions for anybody? Any questions for anybody? Alan, I have some background noise here. Everybody else on mute?
I'm sorry, is there a motion?
No, I was going to make a comment, but I had background noise and I couldn't hear or couldn't communicate. This, I guess part of this is, a significant part of this is addressing some of the recent changes, personnel some changes or titles or responsibilities where it frees you up a little bit more to do some things more on the higher side, and then you have support, help with Clayton, right, in the new role. But generally speaking, as you said, that the investment discretion that is limited and that is not changing, right? Is that accurate? It's some house cleaning type items here. Some of that, is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, we I think there's a big goal within the agency to have succession planning and cross training and have different people able to exercise the ability to make investments, to liquidate investments when we need them done. I think we added an investment administrator position and we've lost some positions. So there's been some shuffling. If you recall, we had Joyce Deepold here one time who had worked on investments. We had Allison Williams that had worked on, debt financing. So we've added some new staff members in recent years, including, Clayton Viewig and Dana Tate on the investment management and debt financing sides. So at some point we needed to add Clayton's name to this resolution, or his title, essentially functional title. And then to your point, also titles have changed. So we've kind of scraped by with the resolution for 10 years, but at some point, a lot of these titles had changed and we needed to at least update the titles. And I guess the main point is once we're adding the investment administrator position, it's also a good time to clean up the titles as well. A couple other points is that when we make investments, part of the more detailed process is that we send out an investment notification to other senior management. So they're aware that trades are happening in the portfolio. And that investment notification also explains the rationale and justification and a bit about where the portfolio is that we're making the investment is in terms of duration relative to its benchmark. So management's aware that these trades are happening. When the trades are settled, we have to send instructions to the trustee bank, which is primarily Bank of New York Mellon. So we're sending that along, and a second person from management is signing off on that. So we have two people that sign off on those trade tickets, essentially, that go to Bank of New York Mellon. So that's another part of the process. And then, we have a whole treasury unit that is an accounting group that essentially settles that transaction in the accounts and all of our trades are settled DVP, meaning delivery versus payment. So what happens is on settlement date, we've already sent in a trade ticket to the trustee bank. They're expecting delivery, let's say, of a security, and they are essentially required to then pay for that security from that particular account. So DVP trading is essentially no risk because the security and the cash, cross at the same time through DTC. So that's essentially the process. And then we're coming back to the Finance Committee with reported holdings and the board each month with performance.
Thank you. Are there any other any questions or comments on this? Okay. If not, is there a motion to advance this item to the full board for further consideration?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by
Second.
member Rosen, second by member Carroll. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And Alan, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Just to note, we had two approval items on the agenda today, as you know, and that would complete the second of the two approval items. We have now we will go into item number 3, and we have 3 updates coming. So item number 3, and we have a fiscal year 2022 Department of Legislation Services budget analysis. Chantel Green and Jeffrey Brown will present. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. For the record, this is Jeffrey Brown, Budget Director for the MDTA. As you just mentioned, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the DLS analysis, and Chantel Green will provide a little bit more detail on some of the issues raised in our responses to that. So turning to the first page of the DLS analysis, we can see that our full year 22 budget is $433.3 million, which is a $42.2 million increase, or 10.8% increase versus full year 21. The biggest drivers are two things: $12.8 million increase in personnel expenses, and that's due to the restoration of the hiring freeze positions, and a $12.5 million increase in debt service due to some additional bond issuances. The biggest drivers of capital for that is two of the biggest ones are the Nice Middleton Bridge and the I-95 ETL extension. Turning to page 2, the capital budget summary, we have a $577.4 million budget, which is a $27.9 million or 5.1% increase versus full year 21. As mentioned before, the two key projects are the Nice Bridge and the I-95 ETL extension. As we move to the bottom of that page, you can see some of the one of the key observations from the analysis is that COVID-19 is driving a drop in our toll traffic and revenue. And moving to page 3, you can see that generates a concern that the stress of this revenue drop, what that will have upon the MDTA. And as a result, there was a recommendation to restrict funding due to the stress, and a request for a report out on, a report from us on this impact to the MDTA. And Chantel will go into a little bit more detail with our response to that later. I'd like to jump ahead to page 7 of the DLS analysis, which is our operating budget and detail of where the $42.2 million variance goes. That $42.2 million, as mentioned before, $12.8 million is personnel. Again, the restoration of funding from the hiring freeze explains that variance. The $12.5 million debt service, as mentioned previously, increased due to the bond issuances and increased debt service. For Easy Pass, there's a few aspects to that. First, there's as we move to more all electronic tolling, we have more need for transponders, and additionally expect more credit card fee processing as well. So that drives a 4.4 million increase. If you move to the very bottom of the analysis, you can see there's another easy pass line, which is as we move to 3G tolling and we have 2 new vendors, CAPS and TransCore, we expect to reduce costs by 5.7 million. Some of the next big expenses are in IT. There's 4.1 million, and that's driven by purchase of a new budget system, excuse me, a new health and safety system, some additional applications and additional software renewals drive that increase. In addition, we have a net app storage maintenance upgrade. Typically that happens every 5 years. That was delayed from last year, and that's an increase of 1.5 million. And finally, a 1.4 million increase as we expect to replace numerous end-of-life computers. Moving to the next line, we have the building repairs and maintenance, which is up 3.8 million. Really, the driver of this is for the FY21 amended budget. We had a task in this area to reduce expenses, to try to reduce the stress. When you compare to the FY21 preliminary, we're actually below that, but we're above the FY21 amended budget. Moving to the management, studies, engineers, et cetera, that is a similar story. We are up versus the full year 21 amended budget because of tasks, but we're pretty much in line and actually below the FY21 preliminary budget. So it's more in line with ongoing expected activity. Motor vehicles increased by 2 million due to replacing aged vehicles. And then finally, we have a host of objects, ammunition, salt, education, just a whole host of additional objects. All those are roll up to $3.2 million increase. That concludes my overview of the DLS analysis. Like I said, Chantal will move to more detail on our responses, but I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Then I will transition on in. For the record, I'm Chantal Green, Director of Finance here at the Authority. Today, I will provide a brief overview of the various items that the agency was asked to comment on in the fiscal year 2022 DLS budget analysis document. Before I get started, I just want to make sure that you're aware that I will be toggling back and forth between attachment 1, which is the DLS analysis, and attachment 2, the agency's responses to the DLS analysis. So because the topics are related, I'll discuss the points raised by DLS on pages 11 and 22 of the analysis together. So on page 11 of the analysis, the agency was asked to comment on the rising levels of projected debt issuances and the financial forecast, and what the authority will do if the $3 billion statutory limit is met. And then turning to the first issue, which begins on page 21, the DLS write-up raises several concerns. One, that the agency's unencumbered cash is nearing the policy level of $350 million, that the authority is approaching its outstanding debt capacity, and that the authority has not taken steps to mitigate the decline in revenue due to COVID-19. DLS concludes its remarks by recommending budget bill language restricting $5 million in the Maryland Port Administration and the Maryland Aviation Administration's budget that is used to reimburse the authority police for law enforcement services until a report is submitted that includes financial projections through fiscal 2031. In the agency's response, the authority noted that it took swift action to mitigate the near and long-term fiscal impacts of COVID-19. I'm sure that this committee recalls that not only did the agency pursue innovative financing solutions, such as advance funding a portion of debt service, but that the authority also reduced the operating and capital budgets to achieve $409 million in savings over the fiscal year 2020 to 2026 forecast period. Regarding the authority's unencumbered cash balance, The agency noted that the board has an adopted in policy that requires the agency to maintain an unrestricted cash balance of $350 million and that the authority is in compliance with the policy. As for debt issuances, the authority noted that it does not anticipate reaching the $3 billion statutory debt limit and that the debt issuances shown in the forecast are primarily related to the financing of the Nice-Middleton Bridge and the I-95 ETL northbound extension. The agency noted that both of these projects have been reflected in the authority's financial forecast since June of 2018 and are accounted for in the authority's near-term and long-term financial planning. Perhaps most importantly, when comparing the current financial forecast to where the agency thought it would be in 2018, as shown in the chart on the first page of attachment 2, the agency's budget hearing responses, you'll note that our debt outstanding remains at $2.4 billion in fiscal year 2023. Our debt service coverage remains at 2.8 in fiscal year 2024. And that capital expenses are $364.3 million less than forecasted in June of 2018. Regarding the report requested by DLS, the agency requested that the language be changed to committee narrative, and by committee narrative, we mean a report that does not tie up any funding. The agency believes that the request to restrict funding pending the receipt of the report is unwarranted given the authority's long-standing track record of submitting budget committee reports as requested. Lastly, the authority requested that the due date of the report be changed to December 31st, 2021, which would enable us to be able to provide the most accurate information available, including actual fiscal year 2021 revenue and expenses, as well as an updated independent traffic and revenue forecast, which, as this committee knows, is typically done in the fall of the year. Based on the comments of the House Subcommittee Chair, while it sounds like December 31st may not be feasible, a November or possibly early December due date appears to be promising. So with that, I will turn to the second issue, which begins on page 22 of the DLS analysis document. In short, the DLS write-up provides a brief summary of the I-495 and I-270 P3 partnership and recommends that the authority comment on the preliminary report regarding the first phase of the project, the toll setting process, and how toll rates will be adjusted going forward. In its written responses, the authority noted that because of the complexity of the information during the February board meeting, authority staff presented key highlights of the toll setting process in advance of the spring board meeting, where dynamic tolling coupled with the introduction of a soft rate cap will be discussed. And that in compliance with state law, to ensure that the public is engaged in the toll setting process, the authority will provide opportunities for public review and comment in each county where the changes for the P3 program are proposed to be implemented. And finally, the authority concluded its remarks by noting that the full report was presented to the board last month, along with the toll rate setting process, and that report is available on the authority's website. And with that, unless Deb has anything else to add, this concludes the overview of the fiscal year 2022 budget analysis document. Be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Member Von Paris, I don't have any additional comments to add. We're happy to answer any questions the members may have.
Okay, thank you.
Chantal,
Thank you.
I have a quick question. By the way, great job on this and the response. I always learn a lot from this particular report. In regard to the response, I'm just more curious as a technicality, the nature of the report. I mean, you presented a lot of facts that answer the questions that were put forward. So what additional information are they ultimately looking for to get them comfortable?
Are you referring to the DLS report that's requesting language be? So yes, let me direct you to the specific page so that we can take a look at it together.
Yeah, let's say on page 22. Yes. Or I guess the summary is on page 21.
Yes, my PDF is acting up a little bit on me, but if you turn to page 24 of the DLS analysis document, and you know, this is the actual language that DLS is proposing that restricts funding. And in that language, it's highlighting what they're looking for specifically. So it refers to a report that discusses future stress resulting from revenue issuances and things of that nature. And then it specifically asks for the report shall be submitted. If you can see in the underlined text, maybe the last 2 or 3 sentences, it says the report shall be submitted by July 1st and that the budget committee shall have 45 days to review and comment. But then it also mentions within the text of the explanation that the committees are concerned about ongoing fiscal stress that the authority is under, and that they want a report that outlines forecasted bond issuances through fiscal 2031, projected total debt through 2031, and projected total increases through 2031. So essentially they're asking for a long-term financial forecast. They want to see where we'll be in terms of our debt issuances, our revenues, as well as whether or not any total increases are needed during that time frame.
Okay. I imagine that information won't be, we do a lot of, we have these projections basically, so they shouldn't be too challenging to come by.
Yes. And we typically provide, in accordance with state law, we provide a 6-year financial forecast. So they're essentially asking us to go out an additional 4 or so years.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Just a comment I know we take this report very seriously, and as we do the response, and I guess I know that it's the finance team is working hard on this, has worked hard on this, but there's also a lot of great deal of information in this report, both in the report itself and the response that personally I'm going to have to look at it and study it a little bit. It's quite a bit of information to have and without having too much time to further evaluate it and share, ask questions or even share concerns. But anyway, I appreciate the effort that went into the response and the comments the questions that were asked today by the members. So if there are no other comments or questions, we will move along.
So actually, sorry,
yes.
I don't know, just one other point, Chantal. I imagine in the report we're going to call out the fact that our financials and pertinent stress testing is also evaluated by the markets and the credit agencies who evaluate us, and presumably they are affirming our financial health by retaining our AA status, and we should certainly call that out in our response, because bondholders would be impacted otherwise. So I think it'd be important to note.
Yes, certainly, Member Rosen. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the presentation today, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Chantal.
You're welcome.
Okay. Item number 4, the travel plaza, the update on the travel plazas, and we will go to Simon. Hi, Simon. How are you? I think you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, here, I think you're back on mute. There we go.
Good morning.
Simon.
Good morning, everybody. This is Major from the Travel Plaza Administrator. I'm going to give you give everybody a review of the travel plazas, and I'll also be referring to the slide presentation that's in your packet. In 2012, the MDTA entered into agreement with Areas USA to undertake the review of the travel plazas, and this agreement is for 35 years. And I'm kind of going to go over the contract, where the history of areas, the current operations of travel plazas, as well as the impact of COVID on the facilities. So I'm going to scroll down to slide number 3. Why do we even have travel plazas? Number one, they provide a rest area that's clean and safe for the traveling public. It increases highway safety. It also allows to promote and market the state of Maryland. Why a P3 partnership? This allows us to concentrate on our area of expertise, which is highways, tollways, bridges, tunnels. Hospitality is not our core competency. So all of the funds that would have been spent to renovate and put in new travel plazas were actually now spent on our infrastructure, and no toll dollars were spent on the plazas. On slide number 4, it kind of goes in the background of the agreement. It's a 35-year agreement with Areas USA. They put in an investment of both plazas of about $56 million. As the way that we recognize revenue, collect revenue, is 10 to 15% of the gross revenue at the plazas, and I will kind of go through the matrix of the mix of the commodities, as well as the formula is based on its travel plazas of Pacific. Slides 5 and 6 show Maryland House and Chesapeake House, the days that they were opened. Scrolling down to slide number 8, who is Areas USA? Areas USA is an entity owned by Areas SA. They are the third world's largest expert in the field of food. They've got a 40-year background in food, beverage, retail. They're very large in airports worldwide. Currently in the United States, they operate in at least 11 locations. Their tolling operations include the H service plazas along the Florida Turnpike. Scrolling down to slide number 10, gives you a breakout of the revenue received by the MDTA So currently we are looking at, for fiscal year 2020, there was a drop down to $3.54 million collected. The biggest reason for that was the impact of COVID. Travel has really dropped down. Hopefully, as people are get more vaccinations out there, that travel, those numbers will increase. One of the things to note is that there's been no bus traffic at both plazas. And that's been a huge impact to revenue. In slide number 11, what I did was I took the numbers from 2020, kind of broke them out so everyone can see the break that we had between the two plazas. And you'll see at the bottom, there's, it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. Maryland House collects more money. It's a larger facility. And I'm going to move over to slide number 12 to show the impact of COVID-19 on the revenue collected. So the left-hand side chart breaks out the COVID months starting from March 2020 through January 2021. We collected during this time period $2.4 million. That compares to year over year versus the non-COVID months of 2019 to $4.1 million. So there's been a significant impact of COVID. People aren't traveling. As again, restrictions come down, we can have more seating in the travel plazas. As people become more comfortable in travel, that number should increase. Moving on to slide number 14, this kind of goes into the matrix of how we receive our revenue. The contract is basically travel plaza and commodity specific. So there are different formulas for what we generate as far as the primary facilities. These are the travel plaza themselves. We also have convenience stores, which are part of the Sunoco operations. Moving down to slide 16, which kind of goes into fuel sales. This is also another matrix that is travel plaza specific. Nutshell is the more product that is being sold, we look at the thresholds, which will then determine how much we are actually collecting. So as the concessionaire does well, we do well. Moving on to looking at what's going to be happening at the travel plaza on slide number 18. One of the biggest changes that we've had at the travel plazas is that the concessionaire has now installed self-serve order kiosks. So basically what happens is customer walks up to the Wendy's or Dunkin' Donuts, they put their order through on the screen. It is to help improve the processing of the order. As you go through the menu, it also will suggest items that you may want to purchase with your food. It basically, hopefully, we are looking at to see if it will increase sales. So as you're at Dunkin' Donuts, you order your breakfast sandwich, you order your coffee, it may suggest, would you like a chocolate frosted donut? That is one of the things that we're going to be monitoring to see if it will increase sales. And also the concessionaire feels that the kiosk will help in labor utilization, basically to allow more people to be actually moving away from the point of sale to actually be assisting in processing orders. Looking ahead, there's going to be quite a bit of challenges for the concessionaire. One of the biggest areas that they're looking to improve at the travel plazas is the parking lots, the ramps, and lighting. We want our customers, our guests, when they're arriving at the travel plazas, to feel comfortable, be safe, and that's going to be one of the projects. They're also looking at new dining and ordering options. They're constantly looking at the mix of food that we have. We want to be able to appeal to all ages and also be health conscious too. One of the larger of the other projects is they're going to be looking at renovations of the restrooms. That is probably the number one reason why folks do come to the travel plaza. So we want to make sure that when they do come in, the restrooms are clean, they're updated, and to basically have them come back again and leave a positive experience in their mind. The challenges that the concessionaire and the travel plazas face is COVID-19. One of the things that we have to look at is how the restrictions are being pulled away. We're currently at a 50% seating capacity at the travel plazas. In that area where the two plazas are located, there are islands in the middle of a busy interstate. There's no public transportation, which leads to challenges in staffing. One of the other issues is that there's a lot of competition. There are warehouses that are moving into Hartford and Cecil counties. That provides competition for quality labor. Up the road, we have Delaware House, which is also competing directly with the travel plazas. And as time goes by, one of the challenges is going to be payment technologies. People are slowly moving away from cash to credit card and to other payment options. So that's something that the concessionaire is going to be watching, because at the end of the day, we want our traveling public to be able to get into the travel plazas, do what they need to do, generate some sales for us, and come back again. As I wrap up the presentation, One of the things I do want to mention is when the COVID outbreak took a hold back in March, the Maryland travel plazas were the only travel plaza regionally that did not shut down a single day, a single hour. Some of our neighbors actually shut down the travel plazas, but we never shut down. So, we left a very good, well, I feel a very good taste in the, especially for truckers, because during that time period, the only thing that moved, the only folks that actually came through were our truckers. So I think that's one thing that, we can always say that, again, try to provide the best service that we can for our public, and we never close. We're open 24/7. And with that, I'm going to wrap up my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
Any questions?
Member Von Paris, I had a few questions. First of all, the improvements that you have noted under the P3, is that who would be paying for those improvements?
All the improvements are going to be paid by the concessionaire.
And is it at his option as to which improvements to choose to make?
We actually have a schedule that's in the contract that says by certain years there are milestones or mileposts that they have to meet, and that's part of the process.
Okay, great. And I'm sorry, one more question, and this is more of a general question. So the board currently is looking at another P3 arrangement, and while I know this one is somewhat significantly different than the one we're looking at, we're now almost 10 years into this P3 arrangement. It sounds like overall it's been a good thing. I guess my question is more general. What have you seen as the pros and cons of this P3 arrangement in regards to the benefit and the detriment, if any?
This is Deb. So I think this was the MDOT second P3 that was done. One of the lessons that I think we've learned has to do with key performance indicators. This contract takes more of a philosophy of either the concessionaire is in compliance or out of compliance. There's really not much in the middle. I think that was an important lesson learned, and is certainly addressed in this P3 that you're talking about, the American Legion Bridge to I-370. I guess it's phase one, so it's up to I-70. I think that was one. I think it's also this P3 along with the American Legion Bridge to I-70 P3, it allows for infrastructure to be built that otherwise could not. So at the time of these travel plazas were built, they were in great need. They were well past their useful life, and we were able to provide this service without using toll dollars. And we were able to invest toll dollars back into the infrastructure. That's a similar message that you hear for the American Legion to I-70 P3.
Thank you.
I have a question. Deb, how do we determine the percentage of rev share to make that an equitable thing? If I'm hearing correctly, it's 15%. Why is it not 10, or why is it not 20 or 25? Like, how do you determine that? What's the methodology behind determining that?
So you're talking about for the travel plaza, Member Carroll?
For the travel plaza, yes.
Yeah. So that was a bid item for them. We had 3 goals for the project, and one of the items that they proposed was the percentage of revenue sharing that would occur. So we didn't predetermine it, they proposed it. And it was a factor when we were determining best value.
Okay. So I would assume, if not fully understanding how that process may have worked, but would it be reasonable to assume that the rev share percentage is equal to or greater than what the agency would have received had it maintained control and ownership of the facility?
Yes. So we, in the evaluation process, we use the term a blind bid, but we did financial analysis to compare the proposal, the best value proposal, to what would it look like if Maryland spent toll dollars to build the facility and Maryland contracted out these services. Never had we envisioned operating the plazas because that's not our expertise. We're not in the hospitality business. So we would have had to contract that out. But we did a blind bid to make sure that there was value to the state.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So I see the carve out for fuel and the shift over to electric vehicles. How will we be compensated through this arrangement as EV stations get installed at the two travel plazas?
So Simon, do you want to address how the stations work today?
Yeah, right now the Tesla vehicles are being paid back through Tesla. So it's basically Tesla drivers pull up, they're not being charged at all. The area that we have to investigate is the EVI, the Electric Vehicle Institute. They have their own chargers, which allow you to take like a Chevy Volt. That's an item that needs to be reviewed. In my inspections, it's been 95% Teslas out on the lots, but that is something that we will be reviewing.
Okay. Any other questions? Simon, thank you. And Deb, thank you. And members, thank you for some great questions. Great questions indeed. Okay, we will move on and go to the final item on the agenda today. Item number 5 is an update on traffic and revenue. Supplemental monthly update on traffic and revenue performance. Cheryl will present, and also Deb. And I, just as a note, I believe that we are meeting, this is an early meeting. Generally, we meet a little bit later in the month, right, Cheryl? So I guess Deb, I think Deb, there's going to be an update on this presented at the board meeting. Am I correct?
Right. The information that Cheryl is presenting to you is through January. The information is consistent with the last time I updated you with supplemental revenue information. I don't have additional revenue information for you right now because this meeting falls a little earlier in the month. I'm currently working on numbers through February. So when we have the board meeting, I'll provide you additional information then through February.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, we will get started. Go ahead, Cheryl. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. On my notes. Good morning. For the record, my name is Cheryl Lewis-Orr, MDTA's Director of Revenue. And this morning I will be presenting a summary of year-to-date traffic and revenue trends. And beginning on page 77 of the memo, you will note that system-wide, our revenue was down as of January 31st, 2021 by $152 million compared to last year. $108 million of that decrease was anticipated due to COVID, and that was factored into our forecast. As of January 31st, 2021, our actual collected revenue was $33 million below the forecast. And that the delays in transitioning to 3G continue to be a challenge for us. And as image processing is complete, it's expected that the forecast versus actual revenues will be more closely aligned. Moving to page 4 of there's an attached revenue and transaction update report or trend report, and that's on page 4. so moving to page 4 of that report, there's a breakdown of this forecast versus actual revenue variance. And the third table on page 4, you will note that the legacy facilities represent 12.2 million of the forecast versus actual variance as of January 31st, 2021. And again, it's estimated that once the image processing is complete, the actual versus forecasted variance will decline. Moving on to page 11 of that report, 11 of 13 of that report. Again, the third table on that page shows that ICC revenue is about 20.3 million below forecast. And as of January 31st, 2021, and trip building, in addition to image processing, well, trip building is the primary factor hindering our ability to reflect the actual updated performance for the ICC, and image processing is also a factor. Once those items are completed and up to date, that variance, we expect that variance to be significantly mitigated. Moving on to page 13, there's a summary of ETL revenue trends. And in the third table from the top, you'll note that the forecast versus actual variance is about 569,000 below forecast. And again, overall, once all trip building and image processing is complete, it's estimated that our forecast versus actual variances will be significantly mitigated. And with that, if there are no questions, and if Deb has nothing to, I'm open for questions. Otherwise, I'll turn the floor over to Deb if there are additional updates and details.
Before, I'd just like to add one thing. When Cheryl talks about being mitigated, and she says when they're processed, that doesn't mean this fiscal year. So that statement is sprawling over 2 fiscal years. So this fiscal year, we expect to underperform the forecast by, the latest estimate is 72 million. It is a ballpark number. It gets refined every single month. I had forwarded to the Finance Committee members the credit presentation that we recently did with Fitch and Moody's, and 72 million is the underperformance that we reported to them. And then, a piece of that, about 54 million of it, we expect to shift into the next fiscal year.
Okay. Any questions from any members?
Member Von Paris, I did. And I think I'm just going to probably be reiterating what you already said, but I just want to put it into dollars and cents so I can understand this. So our collections, and this is system-wide, was down 152 million, but we had already projected that to be 108 million was what we expected, which means there's 44 million that, call it unexpected. That is, from what I understand, what you said is mainly due to, is that wrong, Deb? Did I get that wrong?
Yes.
That number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The 152 million, that's comparing to last year.
Right.
So this time, January of last year, we weren't experiencing COVID yet. So that's why that number is really large. The number I would say to focus more on is, see the 33 million right below it, where we're comparing the forecast to actuals. What I'm
Right.
saying is that 33 million is likely going to be very close to 72 million by the time we get to June 30th.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is we're off on our forecast. We had factored in the COVID, but we're still below, even taking in consideration of COVID, we're still below what we projected. And
That's
is
right.
that correct, Deb? Okay.
Yes.
And so it sounds like that difference lies mainly because of the image processing. Okay. So if
that's a large piece of it.
okay. Now, if we attribute it to image collection, is the thought process that this is more of a timing delay and eventually we will be collecting that money as we process, as the process picks up? Is that correct?
Yeah, our latest estimate, and I'm going back to, just a month ago with Fitch and Moody's, is that we'll underperform the forecast by $72 million this year, and 54 million of it will shift into 22. So we'll underperform this year. 54 million will shift next year, which means we'll be higher than the forecast. Now the delta we assumed is lost revenue. But we also tried to take a conservative approach there. It's as closely as traffic is aligning to the forecast for COVID, it's not an exact match. So I think an example is often ITolls can be 5% of revenue. But if you look at the difference between ETC revenue, which is Easy Pass, and the forecast, we're off by a little bit more than 5%. So it's like that type of stuff we added in, and then you have slower collections. And whenever collections is slower, you're going to have higher uncollectibles. It's not unique to tolling. It's any business. If you're slower in collections, you're going to have higher unpaid transactions. And so that's why we did not assume that there would be a complete shift. Now, if we hold all things equal, if we hold operating budget equal, capital budget equal, and the only factor that we change is the bond sale that we have, in other words, size the bond sale to exactly what it looks like, exactly what the debt service will be. And if we change revenue and revenue's underperformed by 72 million, then our debt service coverage ends up being 2.2.
Okay. So the difference between 72 and 54 is 18. We think that 18 potentially that won't be collected. Did I get that right, Deb?
72 and 54.
54, I'm sorry. So I did have that. So I think the difference is 18. We think that that is mainly due to either just uncollectible because of the delay, or that our numbers, our projections of the recovery from the COVID may be slightly off. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah. And we have factors, we talk about image processing as being a huge contributor. Well, image processing also affects the ICC, even when it's ETC transactions. So that's why when we talk about ICC and being further behind on transaction processing, we have to complete image review for a day, even for the ETC transactions. So there's a lot of linkage to the image review.
Good questions, certainly. Any other questions? Deb, I do have a question in terms of this, specifically what we're discussing. Do you plan on providing, or a member of your team providing, a report on this, more focused on this at the board meeting or any other time?
I'll provide, we've been using the term supplemental. I'll provide supplemental revenue information as the current plan at the March board meeting. It will not be in this format. It'll be likely it'll be a format that we've used previously. And I'll show where we are in relation to the forecast.
I guess the seeing it and being able to evaluate the progress or the challenges and so forth that you all are facing in trying to get this going would be beneficial, very beneficial to the board, I think, and our ability to help in any way we can. And I think that's, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but in my view, I guess I feel that is really something that we need.
Yes.
So.
As staff, our eyes are squarely on ensuring we maintain 2 times debt service coverage. And if something happened that we thought was going to put that into jeopardy, we would be coming back to you for action. And we're not at that place. Right now, indications are we will make the 2 times coverage. That's what we are focused on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Or is there anything else you want to add, Deb or Cheryl? We're good?
Yes,
Yep,
thank you.
for me. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, that, as I see it, we have gone through all 5 items on the agenda today. And I thank all of you for your great questions and great answers here. And it's good discussion. So there's nothing else on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move. Member Ardinger.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. Is there a second?
Second.
Member Rosen, seconds. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have
Bye,
a great day,
everybody.
everyone.